Picture this. It's the summer of 1914. A war breaks out, and pretty much everyone thinks, it'll be over by Christmas. But no one, and I mean absolutely no one, could have predicted what was coming. So let's get into how this conflict completely spiraled out of control and became the war that changed everything.
In this quote, wow, it really just lays it all out, doesn't it? This wasn't just another war. This was a world-shattering event. We're talking about empires vanishing, the whole map of the world being redrawn, and setting the stage for, well, the entire rest of the 20th century. The scale is just immense.
So how on earth did it all begin? Well, it all kicked off with a huge, incredibly ambitious plan that was basically built on an illusion, the illusion of a quick, clean, decisive victory.
Okay, so you gotta understand Germany's initial strategy here. They were terrified of a long war on two fronts. So the plan was this lightning-fast attack. The idea was to just sweep through neutral Belgium, loop around Paris, and basically knock France right out of the war in just a few weeks. Easy, right? Well, that ambitious plan, it failed. After a crucial battle at the Marne River, the whole German advance just ground to a halt. And this image here shows the horrific reality of what came next. 4 long years of trench warfare. It became this bloody, static stalemate where millions of men died fighting over, like, inches of mud.
At the same time, though, the war on the Eastern Front was a totally different animal. Forget the static trenches. This was a war of movement, of huge armies clashing in what they called cauldron battles. These massive encirclements meant to just trap and wipe out entire armies. The scale was unbelievable, and the fighting was every bit as devastating.
So you have this deadlock in the West and this chaotic mess in the East. What happens next? Both sides get desperate for new allies. And that, right there, is how a European conflict starts to balloon into a true world war.
And one of the biggest dominoes to fall was this one, a secret treaty signed on August 2, 1914, the Ottoman Empire joining up with Germany and Austria-Hungary. This was a huge deal. It dramatically expanded the whole map of the war.
So why'd they do it? Well, it was kind of a perfect storm of reasons. You had Germany putting on a lot of military pressure. You had this ambitious Turkish minister, Enver Pasha, who saw a chance for glory. Plus, let's be honest, in 1914, Germany looked like they were going to win. And on top of all that, the Ottomans already had plenty of issues with Britain, France, and Russia.
This one decision opened up totally new fronts in the Middle East, places like Gallipoli and Mesopotamia. It forced the Allies to commit hundreds of thousands of troops there. And the political promises made to get support in that region, they would end up creating conflicts that are still playing out even today.
For years, this war was just a brutal, bloody deadlock. But then, in 1917, the single most important event of the war happened. The one thing that would finally, decisively, tip the balance of power.
2.5 years. For that long, the United States stayed officially neutral. President Woodrow Wilson promised to keep America out of Europe's mess, and, most Americans were right there with them. So what on earth could drag a country so determined to stay out into the middle of the deadliest war in human history?
Well, here it is. Germany got desperate. They made a huge gamble to try and starve Britain into surrendering by using submarines to sink any ship they found. And in that gamble, they sank 3 American merchant ships. That was the final straw.
After those attacks, President Wilson went right to Congress. And on April 6, 1917, the vote wasn't even close, 373 to 50. After all that time on the sidelines, America was in the fight.
And America's impact was, well, immediate and just overwhelming. By late 1918, you had 1.2 million fresh U.S. troops pouring into France. The U.S. Navy, which was now the second biggest in the world, started protecting those vital supply lines. And, maybe most importantly, America's gigantic economy started bankrolling the exhausted Allies. With that kind of power thrown into the mix, the tide of the war turned for good.
So the war is over. The Central Powers are defeated, and the world that crawls out of the rubble of World War I is almost unrecognizable. The consequences were just staggering, and they touched every single corner of the globe.
I mean, the political upheaval was total. 4 massive, centuries-old empires, the German, the Austro-Hungarian, the Ottoman, and the Russian, they just collapsed, gone. And in that power vacuum, you see the rise of Bolshevism in Russia, a bunch of new countries pop up all over Europe, and of course the creation of the League of Nations, which was this big attempt to make sure a war like this could never ever happen again. Economically, the entire world got remade. The old European powers were just buried in debt. Meanwhile, the United States came out of it as the world's top industrial power, and basically the world's banker. And at the same time, the war lit a fire under nationalist movements and colonial revolts all across Asia, the Middle East, and Africa.
And the human cost is just almost impossible to wrap your head around. Over 9 million soldiers dead, another 7 million permanently disabled. And if that wasn't enough, the global movement of all these troops helped spread a flu pandemic that killed at least 25 million more people. Society itself changed forever too, as women flooded into the workforce to do the jobs of the men who were sent to fight.
And finally, war itself would never be the same. This war introduced us to terrifying new weapons like tanks, poison gas, and airplanes. It perfected the use of submarines and long-range artillery. Spurred on by all this new technology, modern warfare as we know it today was really born in those trenches.
So the war finally ends with the Treaty of Versailles. It was supposed to guarantee peace forever, but the terms, especially the ones aimed at Germany, were incredibly harsh and created a lot of resentment. Which leaves us with one last, lingering question. Did the treaty that ended the war to end all wars actually just sow the seeds for the next one?